Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're undertaking a really rigorous analytical deep dive into one of the most foundational events in all of Islamic history, the night journey, or Isra and Miraj. We're going to conduct a strictly objective textual and historical autopsy of the sources surrounding this event. Now, our goal here isn't to validate or invalidate a faith, but rather to investigate the profound friction, the historical anomalies, and the honestly fascinating textual contradictions that sit right at the absolute heart of the earliest Islamic manuscripts and apologetics. Okay, let's dive into our roadmap. We'll systematically deconstruct this narrative by looking at four things. 1. The historical anachronism. 2. The biographer's trilemma. 3. The witness discrepancy. And 4. The authenticity crisis.
Starting us off with Section 1, the historical anachronism. To begin, we have to establish our baseline. According to the Orthodox Islamic narrative, which you'll find in the Quran and expanded upon heavily in the Hadith literature, Prophet Muhammad was taken on a miraculous night journey. The story states that he traveled physically from the sacred mosque in Mecca to the farthest mosque, which is widely identified as Al-Aqsa in Jerusalem. From there, he supposedly ascended through the heavens, met previous prophets, and spoke with God, all in a single night. So we're talking about a profound, literal, physical journey.
And this brilliantly illustrates our first major point of friction. The historical timeline simply does not align with a literal reading of a physical journey to a structural mosque. Why? Because during Muhammad's lifetime, the physical building known as the Al-Aqsa Mosque did not exist. It just wasn't there. Historical records confirm that the actual structure of Al-Aqsa was constructed by the Umayyad dynasty decades after the Prophet had already passed away. So he literally could not have physically entered a building that had not yet been built. Because this anachronism is so undeniable, Islamic scholarship has had to adapt. Our sources note that early apologetics actually pivoted their definition. To reconcile the chronological impossibility of a physical building, the argument is made that the Arabic word masjid linguistically just means a place of prostration. Therefore, they argue it wasn't a physical building he visited, but rather just the general location of the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. It's a fascinating example of theology literally having to bend around historical fact to keep the narrative intact.
Which brings us to Section 2, the biographer's trilemma.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the absolute clash of foundational traditions we see. On one side, we have the testimony of Aisha, the Prophet's most prominent wife, recorded in early biographies. When skeptics questioned how Muhammad could possibly make a month-long caravan journey in one night, she clarified that his physical body stayed resting right there in her bed. She explicitly stated it was only his spirit that underwent the vision. But on the flip side, the Orthodox tradition, which is heavily detailed in the Sahih Bukhari hadith, demands a highly physical event. In these accounts, Muhammad's chest is physically cut open, his heart is washed in a gold tray of belief, and he physically rides a white-winged animal called the burak that's described as smaller than a mule but bigger than a donkey.
This creates a severe logical trap for anyone analyzing the texts. Step 1. You have the Orthodox physical tradition. Step 2. You have the spiritual tradition championed by Aisha and another early figure, Muawiyah, who called it a true vision from God. Step 3 is where it gets incredibly tricky. The earliest major biographer of Muhammad, Ibn Ishaq, writing in the 8th century, compiled both of these directly contradicting accounts right next to each other. The trap is this. If the journey was physical, Aisha's intimate first-hand account is false. If the journey was purely spiritual, well, then the towering Orthodox tradition of the physical burak and the washed heart is entirely false. They absolutely cannot both be true.
So you have to ask yourself, why would a revered early historian like Ibn Ishaq compile a direct textual contradiction in his defining biography? Well, we have to understand that early scholars functioned more as compilers than modern critical editors. Their primary goal was preserving the varying oral accounts circulating at the time. The very presence of this contradiction proves that back in the 8th century, the Islamic community itself was deeply divided on whether this was a literal physical event or a spiritual vision. The physical narrative was absolutely not the universally accepted, unquestioned fact it's often presented as today. If we look at this early biography, specifically page 183 of Ibn Ishaq's Sirat Rasul Allah, detailing the night journey, we see that when compiling these conflicting accounts, he recognized the immense difficulty of the subject. The text notes that this topic is a searching test of men's faith. Rather than definitively choosing one side, he skillfully hedges his bets, writing that God took Muhammad in what way he pleased, or in Arabic, kayfa sha, meaning how God wished to show him. Even the earliest biographer refused to definitively stamp the event as entirely physical, leaving that tension completely unresolved.
Let's move on to section 3, the witness discrepancy.
So, the crucial point here is the total isolation of this miracle. According to the Quranic text in Surah al-Isra, the primary witness granting this journey was Allah, specifically to show Muhammad our signs. The Hadith literature adds that he was accompanied by the angel Gabriel and rode the Buraq. What is entirely and starkly missing from this list is, well, humanity. This creates a massive epistemological void. Think about it. If we contrast this with the epistemology of the gospel miracles of Jesus, which were reportedly performed in broad daylight in front of large crowds and multiple earthly witnesses, the night journey stands in total isolation. It relies on zero earthly human eyewitnesses. No human saw him leave on the Buraq. No human saw him ascend. No human saw him return. It happened strictly at night, leaving the entire foundation of the narrative reliant solely on the prophet's own self-reporting the very next morning.
Let's move to our final section and see how this all builds to a head: the authenticity crisis. Here is a systematic summary of the unharmonized dilemmas we've deconstructed directly from the source text today. Historically, the Quran claims a journey to a mosque that simply wasn't physically there, forcing a theological redefinition of the word just to make it fit. Textually, the most intimate witness to the Prophet's daily life, Aisha, insists his body never left the bed, directly fracturing the orthodox claim of a physical ascent. And evidentially, the entire monumental event occurred in a void, totally devoid of a single human witness to corroborate the departure or the return. Which leaves us with this final, genuinely provocative thought. We have stripped away the later hagiography today and looked strictly at the foundational texts. When a historical event is this burdened by historical anachronisms, a complete lack of human evidence, and absolute textual friction between early spiritual claims and later physical dogmas, we really have to ask, can the orthodox literal narrative of the physical night journey truly survive the weight of its own contradictory sources? It's a massive question that history, theology, and the texts themselves just leave hanging in the balance. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer.